There are an incredible number of people missing in the Australian desert, suspected to have been murdered.
I'll throw you down a mine shaft and you'll never be found.
There are so many unsolved murders here. This is the Wild West.
You could not think of a better place in the world to kill someone and dump a body than the goldfields of Western Australia.
We have seen photos of his body.
Code 90, code 90, very decomposed.
How did he get down there? Did he simply fall?
Do you find that story plausible?
No, it's ridiculous.
And where's Jenny?
She was adamant that he was down a mine shaft somewhere.
Very hard to make a case for murder if you don't have a body. Very hard if you don't have a murder weapon. And the cops don't have either of those two items.
If you're looking to dispose of a body, an abandoned mine shaft is a pretty good place.
Don't take me to church.
A killer could dispose of a body, and no one would ever know.
I wanna be buried at sea. Where the ships come in. I wanna be buried at sea.
Do you think there are people out there who know what happened?
I think so.
I have a very strong view when I take on a case that I'm doing it because I think it can be solved. Very often the families can see what has happened when a crime has taken place. They can look at all of the circumstances and it seems incredibly obvious to them, we know who did it. The case of Ray and Jenny Kellett is an excellent example of that.
We got a media release sent into the 7 newsroom in Perth, I believe early April.
A police convoy makes its way through remote tracks en route to the abandoned campsite of Raymond and Jenny Kellett. It's the starting point for a massive police operation.
There was a couple called Raymond and Jenny Kellett who had travelled to Sandstone to look for gold, and they hadn't been in touch with family and friends for near on 10 days, maybe even closer to 2 weeks by the time we found out about it. So we decided, look, we better travel up there and start reporting this case properly.
I was drawn to this story because you don't have one person missing, you have 2 people missing. When you go out there and you see the landscape, how harsh it is and how enormous the areas are, how isolated you are from the rest of the world, it's impossible for you not to get into your mind it's one of the most dangerous places on earth.
So obviously WA, there are a lot of prospectors who go missing all the time because it's a vast state. There are lots of areas where, you know, people do find gold. So we often hear from police about prospectors going missing.
Ray and Jenny Kellett were wonderful people who took in stray animals. And one of the animals that they took in was Ella, a Great Dane. Ella was a rescue dog for 49-year-old Jenny and 47-year-old Ray. They'd both been married and had kids before, but were taking a second chance on love. They'd bought a little hobby farm, a long-held dream for both of them. They both had good jobs flying in and out of the mines, where Ray was a plant operator and Jenny drove those massive iron ore trucks.
And Mum worked like a demon. She really pushed herself because she was working pretty much in an all-male crew. She was like, I can do just as good as the rest of you. So she'd work twice as hard as them to prove herself. I mean, it hurt her back, but she really, really enjoyed the work.
When you go out to the scene of a crime, you start to understand it in a way that you can't just by looking at documents and information and maps.
8 or 9 days, I believe, after the Kelletts were last seen alive, Ella the Great Dane was found by a local caravan park operator.
I was cleaning the amenities and I walked out and there she was. I thought it was strange. I'm like, oh, where have you come from?
Right, and was she dehydrated? Was she hungry and thirsty? And did it seem to you that she had been walking for a long time?
She was thirsty because I gave her a drink as soon as I realised that she didn't belong to anyone.
And what happened next? How did you find out who she was related to and where she had come from? What did you do?
She had a collar on, and that had the information. So I rang the Shire and they've given me 2 mobile phone numbers.
And so I think police actually released that information pretty early on because all reports from their family were that they were dog lovers and they were never separated from Ella the Great Dane. So the fact that she was found starving and thirsty 8 days after anyone had heard or seen from them really raised the alert level as to, you know, possibly what could have happened to this couple.
I think we were down as like a second contact because we had a lot to do with Ella, the dog. I just thought, where's Dad then? Where's Dad and where's Jenny?
And that was when my stomach just dropped because there was no way in 1,000 years that Mum and Ray would abandon Ella.
Hello, Dave. I'm Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Thank you for coming out. I know that this is not easy. You happy to go out and have a look around?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so this road that we're on, this is the road out to the campsite?
Yeah, that's right. It's about 5 or so kilometres that way. Yeah, so they travelled in a convoy.
3 cars?
3 cars.
And
3 trailers as well. 3 cars, 3 trailers.
Fully equipped for a big prospecting session?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
3 cars, because Ray and Jenny weren't going prospecting on their own. They teamed up with this man, Graham Milne. How did your mum and Ray become friends with Graham Milne?
They met through work. Graham Milne was the paramedic up on their mine site, and Mum was having, I think, some back troubles, like from the bouncing truck. She was having a sore back, so she had met Graham just needing a little bit of medical advice while she was up on the mine site.
This is the track that goes into the camp. It gets a bit lumpy.
All right. Because the terrain here is pretty rough.
It is.
Graham Milne knew that Ray and Jenny were keen to find gold.
Possibly missed.
This is the first piece of the Graham Milne story I question. Sandstone's gold rush ended more than 100 years ago. Dave Kellett has done his own research on just how lucrative this piece of desert really is.
The locals that we've spoke to said that they don't even come out here because, you know, from 1900 onwards, it's just been continuously prospected.
So it's not undiscovered, it's not uncharted?
Not at all, no.
But Graham Milne had a plan, and it involved going deep below the surface of the earth, using a very particular method.
The idea was that they were going to abseil down these old abandoned mine shafts and somehow find, the mother lode.
This is the campsite where Ray and Jenny set up camp?
Yeah.
This was the last place then where Ray and Jenny were seen alive?
Yeah, that's right. You've got the tree there for shade and an ideal spot to camp.
What did police tell you about the campsite as they discovered it?
They said that it looked like they had just gotten up from the campsite and wandered off. There was no signs of foul play or no signs of a struggle or anything like that. There was even 2 coffee cups on the camp table there that were half full.
It looked like it was fully occupied, but there was no one here.
That's right, yeah.
When we arrived in Sandstone, nobody wanted us there. It is very remote. The terrain is rough. There are hundreds of abandoned mine shafts, and only the most experienced gold prospectors head there to hope that they strike gold.
Because the landscape was so easy to get lost, police weren't keen for us just to go wandering around on our own. That whole landscape is pockmarked with abandoned mine shafts, and it's not like they're signposted or they're fenced off. You know, if you're not careful, you could easily fall down one of these shafts.
We begged them to allow us to film just one mine shaft.
Right.
Just so we could get some basic footage of the rope technicians that had travelled from Perth to head down the shafts to look. They strapped my cameraman into a full body harness and they dipped him over the top of the mine shaft. There was a rope technician down the bottom, but the shaft is shaped like a bell. So from the camera, we couldn't see anything, but all of a sudden we heard code 90, code 90. One of the firemen turned to me and he said, "Oh gosh, we didn't expect that." And I said, "What does that mean? What are you talking about?" And he said, "That's a body."
The mine shaft was about 1.8 k's away from their campsite, and it had actually been cleared by police and emergency services. They hadn't gone down it, they just looked from the top and hadn't seen anything.
The idea is that if you did fall down a shaft, you would either be crumbled at the bottom, or if you were only injured, you would position yourself in a spot where you could be seen from above.
That shaft had been checked already, and it was only because we had requested footage that it triggered another search of that shaft.
They came to us straight away and said that they'd found a body, but it was highly decomposed, and it's not possible that it was either Ray or Jenny.
Police said the body wasn't that of one of the missing prospectors, but it doesn't take a scientist to put two and two together. We had missing prospectors and a heavily decomposed body at the base of a 12-metre mine shaft.
I think it was the next day that the forensic guy come out to retrieve the body. I can't remember how he put it, but when I was speaking to the guy, he said the body wasn't as decomposed as we thought, and it was a male. That was pretty much, yeah. And so,
when did it become apparent that this was in fact Ray Kellett?
It changed very quickly, very, very quickly. By the following day, there were reports that it was him, and then that is where the investigation took off.
This was one of those cases where there were multiple searches. I think there were 4 phases of search spread over a number of months.
The purple grid is the proposed new search zone.
How did he get down there? Did he simply fall? Was he pushed? How did he die? And where's Jenny? This eventually grew into the biggest and most expensive search ever undertaken by WA Police. Where is Jenny? And is this now foul play? Graham Milne, he was the last person to see them alive. So when he agreed to sit down with the Sunday night program, that was hotly anticipated, to find out a bit more about his dealings with the Kelletts, any clues really as to what could have happened to them. But he didn't really shed a whole lot of light.
Can you begin to explain what's happened here? What do you think?
I don't know. I've run through all sorts of different scenarios, possibilities, and nothing makes sense. Just nothing makes sense at all.
And he said, well, look, on the 19th, they all made the long drive up to Sandstone. Apparently, during the time that they were setting up and over those 2 days that they were all there, Ella the Great Dane was consistently running away from camp. Mr. Milne said that he got a bit annoyed. And he told them, look, I haven't come up here to chase after a dog. I've come up here to go prospecting. So you guys go and chase her. I'm going off on my own.
Cleaned up camp. And then that morning I went prospecting.
Mr. Milne went off prospecting for gold on foot out there in Sandstone alone for what turned out to be between 18 and 20 hours. He eventually returned to camp around 2 or 3 a.m. the next day. Mr. Milne said that he packed up his gear, didn't say goodbye to the Kelletts, and left to then drive 8-9 hours back to Perth in the middle of the night. Mr. Milne originally told police that Ray could have just run off after the dog, as he was so often doing, tripped and fell down the mine, and Jenny was with him, stayed at the top there, worried about him. Then, after a number of hours, it got dark and she decided, I better go and get help. And then she got lost.
Do you find that story plausible?
No, it's ridiculous. Well, for one, Ella wouldn't have been running away from the camp regardless.
We kept saying, no, Ella wouldn't run away from them in the first place. That's not what she does. She would run to them. She wouldn't run away from them.
The idea that Ray could have even accidentally fallen down there. You can see it's the most prominent shaft in the area. It's just, there's other shafts that's possible, but this one.
Because it has quite a lot of tailings around it and the timber collar.
Yeah.
And you have to leave the road.
Yeah, you could not miss this shaft if you tried, yeah. It just didn't make sense that Ray could ever be missing. It's just not his nature, He was just a country person through and through. He's, he just grew up in the bush.
His sense of direction was uncanny. We would have no idea where we are, and he'd be like, it's okay, give it a couple of minutes. He always knew where we were, what way to go. I don't know how, but he knew.
So for him to get lost on this trip, we never thought that was a factor from the start.
We grew up on the farm, we sort of didn't really go anywhere else. It was just farm life. Us three boys would always be out in the bush, hunting something or just, fossicking around all the time. Ray pretty much, he was always the leader in every aspect. He taught me everything from childhood. He taught me to read and write, taught me how to ride a bike, probably taught me how to walk. Oh.
In your view, Dave, did the police treat this campsite like a crime scene?
Absolutely not. So when Milne come up 2 days into the search to show them around, they let Milne stay overnight, unsupervised. So all the cops were in town, staying in town, so they left at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Milne was allowed to stay here with
while the camp was still here.
Yeah.
While Ray and Jenny's cars were still here, trailers were still here.
That's right.
And Graham Milne was staying over there.
Right.
2 days after the disappearance.
On
and
his
no
own.
police presence?
None at all.
No crime tape?
No.
No security of any kind on the
Nothing.
camp?
Anyone and everyone wandered through there. Shire workers, SES volunteers, the police themselves. Nothing was quarantined off. We were allowed to collect the cars in the days that followed.
I picked the cars up as a 19-year-old, drove them home, and 2 detectives came the next day and said, if you search through it and find anything unusual, let us know.
Mr. Milne went up there after a request from the police. At that stage, you've got to remember, though, this wasn't a murder investigation. This was just purely a missing persons case, and he was up there to help.
I remember asking the police in town whether he was being monitored, and they sort of said, why would we do that? And I was like, you know, there were 3 people in the bush and there's only one of them around.
It was really only after the post-mortem came back, after, of course, Mr. Kellett's remains were identified, that suspicion was really raised.
We are applying all the investigative principles for a suspected homicide.
When did you become aware that Graham Milne was the suspect in the potential homicide?
I can remember getting a call from a police officer saying, we're going to be bringing Graham in for questioning.
Graham Milne ducks down on the back seat of a police car after several hours of interviews with detectives last night.
I was hoping that it was an arrest, that meant they had found something, but then he was released 12 or 13 hours later, I believe.
Today at his Medina home, he wouldn't talk about the disappearance of his friends Jenny and Raymond Kellett, who he took prospecting in March.
Had the two of you formed the view that Graham was involved?
I didn't really know what to think or believe until the coroner's court. I never wanted to accuse Graham of anything.
The first witness, Detective Sergeant Stephen Cleal, told the court several other suspects had been investigated and cleared, all except Mr. Milne. The detective told the court he intended to charge Mr. Milne and referred the case to the Director of Public Prosecutions, but it wasn't accepted. But he says that could still be a possibility down the track.
The fact that police had never identified him publicly as a suspect, never made it clear that they intended to charge him. So when it was revealed that the detective in charge of the investigation during the coroner's inquest said that he did want to charge Mr. Milne over their deaths, that came as a shock to everyone. The only person of interest ever was Graham Milne. He was the last person to see them alive. They had no other information that pointed them in any other direction. We all knew the day that he was due to give evidence, and of course, you know, we were all gathered outside the coroner's court waiting for him to come. We heard him on the stand and we saw him leave. He never said anything to any of the waiting media, despite throwing questions at him.
Do you know what happened to Jenny and Ray Kellett?
His lawyer said to the coroner, look, I don't think it's a good idea for Mr. Milne to give evidence because he might incriminate himself. In the end, Mr. Milne struck this deal to give evidence in return for immunity.
The police did a deal. He could give evidence at the inquest and they wouldn't use that evidence against him. They hoped they'd at least be able to find Jenny, if not solve the crime. So here's the timeline of events according to Graham Milne. Ray and Jenny arrived at the campsite with Graham Milne on the afternoon of March 19 in 2015. Milne said they spent the next day setting up camp and chasing after Ella, the Great Dane. On the morning of March 21, Graham Milne says he left the campsite to go prospecting on his own for between 18 and 20 hours.
And he was just walking around looking for gold?
Prospecting, yeah. So with a metal detector, prospecting for gold.
A colleague of Graham Milne told the coroner that in 6 previous prospecting trips, the two of them had never prospected for longer than about 6 hours at a time. Graham Milne said he returned to the campsite in the early hours of the morning on March 22, and he stayed about an hour. He assumed that Ray and Jenny were asleep and he did not wake them. He got into his car and began the drive back to Perth. The coroner then scrutinised his homeward journey. What part of Graham Milne's story doesn't add up for the two of you?
How he left and where he went when he left. If he knew about this trip and it was so planned, why would he leave it to the last second to go back to Perth at 3 in the morning? The idea that he just left them like that without saying goodbye or anything just didn't make any sense.
He always maintained the sequence of events, how he met them, how they travelled there, what they did during their time out in Sandstone. The only thing that varied was the route that he took home.
Tell me about the significance of this road.
So this is the shortcut between Paynes Find and Sandstone. You can either drive this shortcut or gravel road about 200 kilometres to Paynes Find, or you can go back via Mount Magnet on the bitumen highway, but it's an added hour at least.
It might help to explain the two options on a simple map. Graham Milne could drive north, back to Sandstone, and then follow the bitumen road to Mount Magnet, and then to Paynes Find, and that's about 300 kilometres. Or he could drive south on the unsealed road, the shortcut to Paynes Find. That's about 200 kilometres. From Paynes Find, he then heads back to Perth.
What do we know about the way Graham Milne said he left the campsite?
So his version of events was he left the campsite early in the morning. He turned north towards Sandstone, then via Mount Magnet to Perth. And his reasons for that, he said, was that he was having car trouble, so he didn't want to get stranded on this road.
Police wanted to check the accuracy of Graham's story, so they retraced his steps. Now the longer route, which is the one he says he took, would bring him out at a stop sign on the Great Northern Highway. And that's where Graham would have turned left to drive to Paynes Find and then on to Perth.
Do we know whether there's any evidence that suggests that that's a true story or otherwise?
Well, there's 2 points of evidence. One is that there's a CCTV camera in Mount Magnet and his vehicle wasn't picked up on that CCTV at all.
In 2015, a gas station stood on that corner and it had CCTV cameras that could see all the cars as they came and went. The gas station is now gone.
When they asked him why weren't you picked up in the CCTV, he said, perhaps I went around the back of the service station. That's all he said.
But why would you go around the back of the gas station? I drove both routes to see if it was any faster, around the back and around the front. We know that Milne was towing his quad bike on the trailer, so he would have needed to take a lot more care if he'd taken the dirt road behind the gas station as opposed to staying on the road. Graham Milne says he was trying to avoid that stop sign, but it actually takes longer to go around the back than it does to come around the front and end up at the same spot. And there's another problem with Graham Milne's story. Back at the Paynes Find to Sandstone Road shortcut. Police downloaded data from a tracker in Graham Milne's car, which revealed that he was travelling southwest on the unsealed road at 10:17 in the morning on March 22. This is despite his initial insistence that he was only travelling northeast.
So he has told police that he went that way,
Correct.
but his GPS suggests he went that way.
Yes.
When did he change his mind?
When they put the GPS data in front of him, that's the only time. Police formally interviewed him in November. That's when they gathered the GPS data. So that was at least 8 months after the fact.
And now he had a new version of events. Graham Milne says he started driving one way, felt the urge to return to the campsite because he had changed his mind about leaving, and then changed his mind again and returned to Perth, which explains why he might have been picked up travelling southwest.
And when they said, why didn't you tell us that before, he said, I didn't want to appear silly.
Appear silly by
admitting that he changed his mind.
The family in court were really interested to hear how long Graham Milne said he was awake for. About 35 hours, taking into account the 20-hour prospecting mission, the 1 hour at the campsite, and his 15-hour drive back to Perth, a journey that normally takes half that time.
That's a superhuman effort, isn't it?
Yeah.
When police asked him about being awake for 35 hours, he suddenly remembered he'd had a 2-hour nap in his car.
Mum and Ray were really excited. They were still working away because they needed to pay off the farm, and they had been promised, like, oh, there's this spot that's loaded, but I can't get to it alone, is what Graham had told them. They believed that they were really going to hit the money on this trip. They had bought all these supplies. Like, they were experienced campers and great in the bush, but they had got their quad bikes ready and trailers and extra vehicles and extra water. They were really excited about the trip.
So, Dave, one of the important pieces of evidence that was located at the camping site was what's known as a mud map. What is the mud map?
So the mud map was when they were planning the trip, they put coordinates for the entry in and some other details for the prospecting licences that they needed.
Graham was familiar with the area. He'd been prospecting there before, and he had made 2 key contributions to the mud map.
One is a circle with camp written in it, and there's a second circle which says first hole.
Had your mum ever done any abseiling before?
I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure Mum had a fear of heights. So it wasn't in her comfort zone.
I remember her saying, yeah, we've been practicing down the side of the shed to make sure we know how to do it and tie all the ropes correctly.
But also Ray was incredibly safety conscious, so he wouldn't do something risky.
Jenny was one of those women who liked to keep a diary of her events.
Yeah, she had daily entries right up until the day before they drove up. Her last entry said, hopefully go to the hole tomorrow, fingers crossed.
And you believe this is the first hole?
Yes.
Did Graham Milne initially tell police that there was any abseiling involved in this trip?
No, never.
He didn't initially mention the mud map either, which police found in a backpack at the campsite on April 4. When Graham Milne travelled back to Sandstone to assist police in the search for Ray and Jenny, he steered them southeast of the campsite, the opposite direction to the mine shaft where Ray's body was found. In order to build a case against Graham Milne, police had to place him at the mine shaft. And they did find some evidence in the form of 3 cigarette butts.
So we're standing quite close to where the cigarette butts were found. What can you tell me about that?
Okay, so there was 3 cigarette butts found together. 2 of them had Jenny's DNA, 1 had Milne's DNA.
The butts would seem to suggest that Jenny Kellett and Graham Milne were at some point standing at the top of the mine shaft where Ray's body was found. We should say that the 3 butts were not collected and tested until a month after the discovery of Ray's body. The site was not forensically protected by police during that time. How did Graham explain the presence of those cigarette butts at the collar of the mine where Ray's body was found?
He suggested that the cigarette butts got caught in the tread of a police officer's boot and then walked and then deposited there by a police officer.
The coroner decided that that explanation was improbable. Police might think, well, sometimes women just do a runner. You know, they're tired of their marriage and it's run out of steam and they might be worried about leaving for whatever reason, so they take off in the middle of the night. The family, and in particular Jenny's children, know that she would never do that. She would never leave her young children, one of whom was just 19 when she went missing, to navigate life on their own. The big decisions, the 21st birthday parties, should I get engaged, should I move overseas? Where's my mum in all of this? Jenny's not that kind of woman.
Ray and Jenny's family said that they were a loving and devoted couple. A small town like Sandstone, rumours were flying about, you know, could this have been a love triangle that had broken down?
At a 2015 media conference, Dave's brother Malcolm was questioned about Ray's relationship with Jenny.
And how would you describe their relationship?
Very close, they did everything together. Yeah, inseparable.
So there's no suggestion anywhere that you know of anyone else in the family of any sort of schism in the relationship or any problem at all?
No.
It wasn't until the coroner's court where I started to think, no, I believe Milne was in love with Mum.
Is there any possibility in your mind that Graham Milne and Jenny were in a secret relationship and needed to get rid of Ray?
Not a chance, no. Not at all.
And why are you so sure?
Ray and Jenny were so together, you know, in love together in every aspect. Ray was head over heels for her and vice versa. So I think the word they use is laminated together. They're just, you know, always together.
Is it possible that Graham Milne was in love with Jenny?
There's always a possibility, and I think in the police report we read that I think it was his partner's son indicated to police that he believed that Milne and Jenny were perhaps having an affair, and that was based on Milne's reactions to Jenny. He seemed to be infatuated with her, yeah.
So they met through work. Graham Milne was the paramedic up on their mine site.
Did you form an impression of Graham as being somebody who had a lot of friends and a close family and a good social life?
No. He was a very isolated man, but Mum would always see the best in people.
We know that your mum was really beautiful, and we also know that she was a vivacious, warm, friendly, open person. Does any part of you think that it's possible that Graham was in love with her?
I do think he had become obsessed with Mum.
What gave you that idea? What evidence did you hear that gives you that idea?
Mum would see people who were lonely or isolated and she'd try and make them feel welcome. So she'd see someone like Graham sitting alone at the campsite and she would go to him and make him feel welcome and make him feel special. If you're someone who is socially isolated and someone wonderful takes an interest in you, there's a real possibility that you're going to start reading into it a lot more.
The one question that the families wanted answered at the inquest: was Ray's death an accident or was he murdered? They had a forensic pathologist come in and look at all the evidence, and she had to decide the cause of death.
The word she used to describe his injuries was that he had a constellation of injuries. A fractured eye socket, a fractured cheekbone, he had damage to his neck, one of his ribs was broken in 2 places, missing the tips of his fingers on his right hand. He had a broken hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is the bone near the Adam's apple. It helps to support the tongue. Usually fractures occur from strangulation. You know, when we heard that information, you thought, clearly he has been murdered, and that is ultimately what the coroner found, that his death wasn't by misadventure. He didn't fall down that shaft and die accidentally. It was foul play. He was in fact murdered.
The WA State Coroner found that a person or persons unknown had killed Ray Kellett. But what happened to Jenny? The coroner found that Jenny had died at around the same time as her husband. Her body has never been found. There's been no activity on her mobile phone or her credit cards. But without her body, how do we determine the cause of death? The coroner found that Ray suffered a violent death from blunt force trauma at the bottom of the mine shaft where his body was found. The reason? Blood was found deep in the tread of Ray's boot. The coroner found he must have been standing before he collapsed in a pool of his own blood. His body couldn't be seen from the top of the mine shaft. He was at the bottom and sort of to the side. The coroner found it was possible that Ray may have been dragged by the ankles to the side of the shaft, but that wasn't proven. Ray's brother Dave was there for the full 2 weeks of the coroner's inquest. He's read the report and he's examined all the evidence, and he's got his own theory as to what happened to his brother.
They would have come up here to abseil down the hole, so the 3 of them would have set up their quad or four-wheel drive, whichever they were using at the time, here, ready to abseil down. For safety reasons, they would need a spotter at the top, which would have been Jenny. Milne goes down first, Ray follows him. Surprise attacked Ray, killed him, dragged him out of sight, re-emerged, and then, you know, I'm not even going to try and guess what he did after that, but...
And Jenny would have been waiting at the top here.
Yeah.
In all cases of homicide, you need opportunity, and the opportunity presents itself at the base of the mind, but you also need motive. What would have been the motive?
It seems like the motive was for Jenny. Yeah, just get Ray out of the way and then...
Mr. Milne had kept a very low profile, so when he agreed to sit down with the Sunday night program, he's a difficult character to read. I mean, he did cry quite a lot. At times, it seemed he was grieving for them.
If anybody knows anything, please come forward and tell the police.
Were those tears genuine, I suppose? Hard to know. I mean, he's always denied any involvement in their disappearance, and he's never been charged. So you have to take it at face value that he was genuinely grieving for the loss of his friends.
When you go out to the West Australian desert and you see where this couple was camped and you see where Ray's body was found and you try to imagine Jenny out there somewhere in that vast desert, we know she's out there somewhere. What happened to her? Where is she? She has to be brought home to her family. It's only really by going there that you get a sense of the terrain, which is so dangerous, and the heat, and the sense of injustice that somebody could be left out there, essentially to rot. Are there any other suspects in the homicide?
The only other lead there was for a potential other person was something suggested by Graham quite early on. He said he and Ray had gone out to do some shooting and could hear somebody else shooting somewhere else in the area.
Police released this information about, you know, was anyone in that area at the time? Did anyone know anything about gunshots?
No one else has come forward to say they were in the area, and no one can corroborate this except Graham himself.
The goldfields of Western Australia, pitted with thousands of deep 100-year-old mine shafts. Some may contain secret veins of gold. Others harbour something much more sinister. In 2015, near Sandstone, the body of prospector Ray Kellett was found in the bottom of a mine. His wife, Jenny, is still missing. The only person of interest, and potentially the last person to see the Kelletts alive, is their friend, Graham Milne.
Well, I can't stop people drawing their own conclusions. You're going to get there, it doesn't matter what. People are going to say things. Well, they can keep saying them, it doesn't matter. They don't know.
Have either of you ever asked Graham Milne outright, just tell us what happened?
I've never been able to make contact with him.
And he's never reached out to you?
No.
The man who last saw your mother alive has never reached out to you to say, this is what I think happened?
Not a word.
Graham Milne lives in Perth. I decided to try the direct approach. Everywhere. Ray and Jenny's family waited for more than a year for the coroner's report. And when it came, it wasn't good news.
They didn't deem there was enough evidence to charge, so it wouldn't be going ahead.
What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I was dumbfounded.
WA police have said their investigation is active and ongoing. A $250,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction is still current.
They continue their investigation like they say that they will, but unless somebody comes forward with fresh information or the suspects in the case admit to what potentially could have happened, I don't think the answers are ever going to be uncovered.
And in terms of the importance of bringing Jenny home, what would you say about that?
I believe that wherever she may be, she holds the answers to what has happened here. And without her, I don't know whether we're really going to get all the answers that we need.
Does it feel somewhat surreal to be here knowing that she is out here somewhere?
Yes.
And perhaps not too far?
Yes.
Because I was so young, I had to make big life choices without her. And your mum forms who you are, especially if you're the daughter. At this point, it's not even about putting someone behind bars, getting a conviction. It's just about getting Mum. We just want to bring her home.
I would have seen him go up there and I didn't see him. He totally got me, so.
He'd been planning that for a while.
He had been, yeah. Yeah.
And what about you, Dave? Have you got any...
I've always said that I'll never sort of give up until justice can be served for Ray and Jenny. It would mean so much that we could just get this resolved so that we can all, you know, get on with what's left of our lives. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers to Ray.
Cheers
to Jenny.
Cheers, Jenny.
Cheers, Jenny.